My father, to the end of his life, he was still pretty sharp and cutting, could be. He was very angry, very afraid. He could wither you with a look.
At 88, Sir Anthony Hopkins stands as one of cinema's most enduring giants. Few actors have mastered both subtle restraint and volcanic emotion the way he has. Over a career spanning more than 6 decades, Hopkins has played everything from ruthless kings and tormented killers to heartbroken fathers and humble servants. His craft has evolved, but one thing has remained constant: his reverence for great writing. He often says that a good script is like a piece of music. You just play the notes. Today we're exploring 6 films that Anthony Hopkins himself calls his favorites. Some are performances he's most proud of, others are classics that inspired him to become an actor. Each selection reveals something about his taste, his discipline, and the sensitivity behind that famously intense stare.
Whatever you want to do, believe it, believe it, believe it, even if you don't believe. Play the game of belief.
From the chilling calm of The Silence of the Lambs to the quiet heartbreak of The Remains of the Day, and even his admiration for Marlon Brando's explosive power in On the Waterfront, this list captures the full spectrum of Hopkins' artistic soul.
And we talked about it. And he said, "You've got to come back to the theatre." I said, "No, I don't think I could." He said, "We've got to get you back." I appreciate that, and I'm very flattered that he would think I could go back.
So let's begin our countdown. From his complex portrayal of a fallen president to the haunting roles that redefine modern acting. Number 6, Nixon, 1995, The Power of Empathy. When Oliver Stone approached Anthony Hopkins about playing Richard Nixon, the actor wasn't sure he wanted the role. To many, Nixon represented corruption and deceit, a symbol of political downfall. But to Hopkins, he was something more complex, a man crushed under the weight of his own ambition. That sense of empathy became the key to his performance. In interviews from 1995, Hopkins recalled watching the Watergate hearings with fascination and pity. "I had great empathy for him," he said. He was a lonely, tragic figure. Hopkins saw Nixon as a man who loved being president, but screwed it up, and admitted that he was stunned Nixon didn't blow his brains out after the scandal broke.
But nevertheless, he was a remarkable man, and I think a tragic man.
The director of the film, Oliver Stone.
Rather than judge him, Hopkins approached the role like a psychologist dissecting guilt, shame, and pride. Hopkins prepared meticulously. He studied Nixon's voice patterns, the deep growl, the stop-start rhythm, but refused to do a surface-level impersonation. "If you try to imitate, you lose the man," he once said. "You have to find the spirit behind the mask." He used stillness, restraint, and a kind of internal storm to portray a man haunted by his own legacy. What made this performance one of Hopkins' personal favorites wasn't the acclaim, though it earned him another Oscar nomination, but the emotional challenge. Playing Nixon forced him to confront what he calls the dark corridors of power, a recurring theme in his work. Hopkins' empathy extended beyond politics. He understood isolation. Like Nixon, he had battled insecurity and public scrutiny. In portraying the president's paranoia and loneliness, he poured some of his own history into the role. Nixon was searching for love, he reflected, and he never got it. Critics praised Hopkins for humanizing a figure many viewed as irredeemable. He neither glorified nor condemned, he revealed. Stone later said that Hopkins found the wound in Nixon's character, and that's exactly what Hopkins values most in acting: the courage to expose pain without judging it. For Hopkins, Nixon wasn't just political history. It was tragedy in the purest sense, Shakespearean in scope. The film allowed him to explore the fragility behind power, and that exploration became deeply personal.
And I've played some big ones like King Lear and Antony and Cleopatra, but this was a tough one. I've played the other parts I've played in recent years, like, Silence.
Do you think actors should empathize with controversial figures they play? Or is it better to keep a moral distance? How might that change the audience's perception of history? Number 5, On the Waterfront, 1954. Long before Anthony Hopkins ever stepped in front of a film camera, he was a boy in post-war Wales watching black and white movies that changed his life. Among them was Elia Kazan's 1954 classic On the Waterfront. Hopkins has often cited this movie, and specifically Marlon Brando's performance, as the moment he realized what acting could truly be. Hopkins once said that when he first saw Brando's famous "I could have been a contender" taxicab scene, it left him stunned. It's still breathtaking. In that single moment, Hopkins saw a new kind of realism on screen. Brando wasn't acting in the traditional theatrical sense, he was being. Hopkins later described it as a revelation, saying that Brando, along with Montgomery Clift and James Dean, changed everything. They tore down the walls between stagecraft and emotion, showing that authenticity could be more powerful than technique.
No, don't have time to regret. We move on, because we are acceptable for what we are, not what we think we should be.
For a young Hopkins trapped in a small industrial town and struggling to find direction, Brando's raw honesty felt liberating. He realized that great acting didn't mean pretending. It meant revealing something true about the human condition. That lesson would stay with him throughout his career. Years later, when Hopkins portrayed characters as layered as Hannibal Lecter or Stevens the Butler, he channeled that same philosophy. Precision on the surface, emotion simmering underneath. Like Brando's Terry Malloy, Hopkins' greatest roles are studies in contradiction. Pride and regret, rage and tenderness, intellect and vulnerability. Hopkins has said that On the Waterfront also taught him about courage. Not just in acting, but in life. The film's story of one man standing up to corruption mirrored his belief that artists must defy fear to tell the truth. "You can't worry about approval," he once said. "You just do the work." That attitude echoes Terry's painful realization in the cab, that he compromised himself to please others and lost his soul in the process. Decades after first seeing the film, Hopkins still calls Brando a god. In interviews, he has admitted that every actor of his generation, himself included, borrowed something from Brando's example. The emotional honesty, the stillness, the quiet power.
And they're very melancholy people. The Irish have got much more going for them because they're much more extrovert and crazier than the Welsh. The Welsh are rather repressed.
Even as Hopkins carved his own path, he never forgot the man who showed him that less can say more. When you watch Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront, what strikes you most? His vulnerability, his strength, or his silence? And do you think any modern actor has carried that same revolutionary spirit into today's cinema? Number 4, The Father, 2020. When The Father premiered in 2020, audiences were stunned by the power of Anthony Hopkins' performance. At 83 years old, he delivered one of the most emotionally devastating roles of his career, and one that would win him his second Academy Award. For Hopkins, this film was more than another accolade. It was a personal journey into the fragile boundaries of memory, love, and loss. In interviews, Hopkins repeatedly praised the screenplay by Florian Zeller, calling it 99.99% perfect.
Florian really is quite remarkable, a brilliant writer. He told me that it was written for me, so I'm very flattered. It was the most extraordinary experience.
He told The New Yorker that when a script is written with that kind of precision, the actor doesn't have to act in the conventional sense. The rhythm of the words carries you. It's like music, he said. You just play the notes. That philosophy defined Hopkins' entire approach to The Father. The film follows an aging man, Anthony, who is losing his grip on reality. Scenes shift and characters change, mirroring his confusion. Hopkins doesn't overplay the tragedy. He lets small details reveal the heartbreak, the trembling of a hand, the hesitation before a question, the flicker of recognition that fades too soon. His performance is so truthful that audiences feel trapped in the same disorienting fog. Hopkins said he didn't model the role on anyone specific. Instead, he drew from observation, people he'd met, fragments of emotion, and his own fear of decline. He saw the story not as a tragedy, but as a meditation on love and acceptance. "It's not about death," he told an interviewer. "It's about letting go." Behind the scenes, director Florian Zeller said Hopkins' ability to blend vulnerability and authority was key. Even when Anthony lashes out or mocks others, there's a flicker of dignity that refuses to die. Hopkins understood that contradiction deeply. The idea that the human mind, even in decay, still clings to pride and selfhood. The film's final scene, in which his character breaks down and calls for his mother, left audiences in tears. Hopkins revealed that he didn't plan that moment. "It just happened," he said softly. "The words did the work. I trusted them. That trust, in writing, in instinct, in the mystery of emotion, is what defines him."
I don't understand anything about my life. It's as if it was written by some other author, but not me, because I can't say that I cannot claim that I was the architect of my own destiny or my own life, my own existence here at this moment, in the movie business.
For Hopkins, The Father was not a farewell performance, but a reaffirmation. Proof that even late in life, art can still surprise, challenge, and heal. How did The Father make you feel? Comforted, heartbroken, or both? Do you think Hopkins' later performances carry more emotional truth because of his age and experience? Number 3, The Bounty, 1984. When people think of Anthony Hopkins' defining performances, The Bounty rarely tops the list. But for Hopkins, it remains one of his personal favorites. In interviews, he has spoken fondly about the film, calling it a fascinating experience, and expressing admiration for both the production and the director who ultimately shaped it. What makes The Bounty special to him isn't just the grandeur of its seafaring story, but the deep psychological duel at its heart. Hopkins portrays Lieutenant William Bligh, the ship's stern captain whose obsessive discipline leads to the infamous mutiny. Opposite him is Mel Gibson as Fletcher Christian, the charming officer who leads the rebellion. Hopkins once revealed that the project began as a planned 4-hour epic under director David Lean. But when Lean stepped aside, Roger Donaldson took over and condensed the film. "I was glad," Hopkins admitted. The script had been condensed into a manageable length.
Yes.
How do you, are you a workaholic?
Yes, I'm a workaholic. I have a fast car, a fast bicycle.
What mattered to him was that the story still retained its moral complexity. Unlike previous adaptations that painted Bligh as a cruel tyrant, Hopkins insisted on playing him as human. "He's not a villain," he said. "He's a man obsessed with control, and control is another word for fear." That insight gives his performance its depth. Beneath the crisp uniform and rigid posture, there's insecurity, a captain terrified of chaos. Hopkins understood that tension perfectly. His Bligh is both commanding and fragile, a man undone by his own need to dominate. Filming on the open ocean tested the cast's endurance. Hopkins later recalled the exhaustion of shooting for months on real ships in choppy waters, but he loved the challenge. "It was hard," he said, "but there's something about being at sea that strips away pretenses. You find out who you are." That line could describe the film itself, a story of men discovering their limits under the vast indifference of nature. Hopkins' admiration for The Bounty also comes from its craftsmanship. He respected Donaldson's balance of spectacle and character, how every creak of wood and crash of waves reflected the tension between order and rebellion.
Well, I know because I'm going off to do this M.Phil, and then suddenly I thought, actually, maybe just for a year, instead of writing essays, I'll act, because I'd always liked.
The film asks whether discipline or freedom defines leadership, a theme that clearly resonated with an actor famous for control but drawn to chaos. For Hopkins, The Bounty wasn't just another historical drama. It was an exploration of pride, endurance, and the loneliness of command. And perhaps, as he's hinted, that's why he cherishes it. Because Bligh, like many of his characters, is a man trying to master a storm that can't be mastered. Do you think The Bounty shows Bligh as a villain or as a tragic perfectionist? How would you have handled the mutiny if you were in his place? Number 2, The Remains of the Day, 1993. Few performances in Anthony Hopkins' career are as haunting or quietly powerful as his role in The Remains of the Day. Released in 1993 and directed by James Ivory, This adaptation of Kazuo Ishiguro's novel remains one of Hopkins's most cherished works, not because it is grand or showy, but because of its extraordinary subtlety. Hopkins has called its screenplay 99.99% perfect, the same praise he's given only to The Silence of the Lambs and The Father. To him, The Remains of the Day is the purest example of what great writing can do for an actor. It tells you everything, even in silence.
What else about him? He has no sense of humor. He's very rigid. But he's a good man. He's dedicated to his job, he's dedicated to his life. But he misses out a bit. He misses love and he misses...
In the film, Hopkins plays Stevens, an English butler whose entire identity revolves around duty and decorum. Stevens' loyalty to his employer blinds him to the world beyond the walls of the Darlington estate, and to the love quietly offered by housekeeper Miss Kenton, played by Emma Thompson. Hopkins once compared acting in this film to playing Chopin. Follow the notes on the page, and the emotion will come through naturally. You don't add anything, he said. You let the music, or in this case, the words, guide you. Hopkins' performance is a masterclass in minimalism. There are no grand gestures or emotional outbursts. Instead, every flicker of his eyes, every pause in his voice, conveys decades of suppressed feeling. One of the film's most devastating moments comes when Stevens, after years apart, finally meets Miss Kenton again and realizes the life he denied himself.
Into a part. I mean, are you like any fun to be around when you're doing these unlikable scenes, or do you pretty much cut it off when you walk off the set and you're Tony Hopkins and you come back and you're into that mold again?
I cut off very quickly.
His expression barely changes, yet it's as if the weight of his entire existence collapses inward. Hopkins has said that Stevens represents a kind of human tragedy he finds endlessly fascinating. People who serve systems and forget themselves. It's a theme that resonates with his other roles. Men of intellect or discipline who conceal their emotions until it's too late. But The Remains of the Day stands apart for its tenderness. Hopkins doesn't judge Stevens. He mourns him. Critics often note that this is one of the greatest examples of acting through stillness. Hopkins later explained that the restraint came from trust. Trust in the script, in the direction, and in the quiet power of understatement. The less you do, he said, the more it means. For Hopkins, The Remains of the Day isn't just one of his favorite films. It's also his favorite kind of story. One about dignity, loneliness, and the things we never say until it's too late. Do you think Stevens made the right choice by devoting himself to duty? Or do you see his life as a tragic waste? How do you interpret that final, silent farewell with Miss Kenton? Number 1. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. When audiences first saw The Silence of the Lambs in 1991, Anthony Hopkins had already enjoyed a respected career in British theater and film, but nothing could have prepared the world for Hannibal Lecter. With less than 20 minutes of screen time, Hopkins created one of the most terrifying and hypnotic characters in cinema history. For him, The Silence of the Lambs was not only a career-defining moment, but also one of his personal favorite projects.
Well, movies, they say, do go. Oh, it's a terrible thing to say, but people do like entertainment, don't they? They like getting away and they... Yeah.
Hopkins recalled the exact moment he encountered the script. I got about halfway through, he told The New Yorker, and I picked up the phone and called my agent. I said, "Is this offer real?" He knew instantly that it was something extraordinary. Later, he described the screenplay as 99.99% perfect, explaining that it was written so precisely that the actor didn't need to embellish or invent, only to listen and follow its rhythm. The words informed my body, he said. It was like music. What's fascinating is how Hopkins approached Lecter. He didn't play him as a monster, but as a man of extraordinary intelligence, calmness, and curiosity. His stillness became the source of terror. Stillness is powerful, he explained. It unnerves people. Hannibal didn't need to move. He just needed to watch. Hopkins said he drew inspiration from real-life sociopaths' quiet confidence, but he also infused Lecter with charm and humor, making him disturbingly magnetic. He famously kept his voice measured, almost musical. "I wanted it to sound like he's tasting every word," he said. That combination of refinement and menace became unforgettable. Even director Jonathan Demme said Hopkins understood the character more deeply than anyone else. Hopkins won the Academy Award for Best Actor, and the film went on to sweep the major Oscars: Best Picture, Director, Actress, Actor, and Screenplay, an accomplishment shared by only 2 other films in history. Yet for Hopkins, the real victory was artistic. He once said that Hannibal Lecter was the role that taught him complete surrender to the material. When the writing is that good, you just obey it.
First of all, before I say that, I want to say hello to my mother. She's in Wales watching this on television with Eve and Jean and Jill and Tony. My father died 11 years ago tonight, so maybe he had something to do with this as well, I don't know.
In later interviews, Hopkins reflected on why The Silence of the Lambs remains so powerful. Because it's about control, who has it, and who loses it. That theme runs through much of his work, from butlers to presidents to killers. Characters who maintain composure while their worlds collapse. Even decades later, when asked which role he would never forget, Hopkins smiled and said, "I think Hannibal will outlive me." Why do you think Hannibal Lecter fascinates us so much? Is it his intelligence, his calmness, or something darker we recognize in ourselves? At 88, Sir Anthony Hopkins stands as one of the last great bridges between classical theater and modern cinema. A performer who's mastered Shakespearean tragedy and psychological horror with equal conviction. Looking at his 6 favorite films, one thing becomes clear. Hopkins doesn't just admire artistry, he admires precision. Whether he's talking about The Silence of the Lambs, The Remains of the Day, or The Father, his recurring praise for 99.99% perfect scripts reveals how deeply he values the written word. To him, acting begins with listening, to the rhythm of dialogue, the pauses, and even the silences. So now it's your turn. Which of Anthony Hopkins' favorite films resonates most with you? Do you agree that the best screenplays feel like music guiding the actor rather than restricting them? Share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to see more deep dives into the favorite films of cinema legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation. Because as Hopkins once said, we're all just students, no matter how long we've been doing it.